It'll pop up here. All right, we're live. Um, Welcome into LASMNY's Town Hall on Elder Law. I am Alex Simon, and we are going to talk about all the things that we do for seniors in our community. And I'm going to let our guest introduce herself. Maureen, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Maureen Kiefer. I'm a staff attorney in the Syracuse office. I've been practicing law for well over 30 years. I've been doing the senior law for over a decade now.
And Maureen, so you've been with Legal Aid for a while, right?
Correct.
And how did you get your start in your legal career, and what kind of interests you in law? Getting started in law.
Well, I originally was a teacher, and saw a lot of kids that were having problems, and had always been interested in law. But I was raised at the time when I was told that it was difficult for a woman to get a job in the law. You could go to law school and graduate, but getting a job was tough. So I taught for a while and then went back to law school. And in the meantime, I developed an interest in public interest law. So I went to St. Louis University, where the Children's Law Project was originally housed. It moved while I was there out to the West Coast. But pretty much, except for 1 year's clerkship, have always worked in public interest law. Worked at the National Women's Law Center for a while, just an internship there, and worked at Legal Aid as a law student and really liked Legal Aid. So I ended up, this is my third Legal Aid program. I worked in Appalachia for a while, worked at Legal Services for a while in Syracuse, and then moved to Legal Aid here.
Okay, so just for a broad swath of our audience, what types of cases do you handle?
In the senior program, in my county, and each county is a little different because we work on grants.
Right.
And so depending on which grant and what the Office of Aging in that county that we contract with does. I do primarily 3 areas, though I can do any civil area. I can not do any criminal law. Primarily, I do Medicaid, Medicare type cases. A lot of that involves nursing home care. And I do advanced directives, that's wills, powers of attorneys, healthcare proxies. And I do a lot of consumer law, which is folks who are having problems with creditors when you're a senior and you get on a fixed income. Sometimes you can't manage your bills the way you would like to manage your bills just because your income doesn't stretch that far. So we work with those as well. A lot of that type of work also involves dealing with scammers.
Yeah. So. Okay, and we'll get into that. We'll flush out some of those areas that you practice. How would one would qualify or be eligible for your services?
Okay, again, this depends on the county a bit because each grant has different parameters. In my county, because it's a larger county as far as population goes and the population of seniors go, my grant does fund me. So I'm full-time doing senior cases where some of the other counties do not. In most of our counties that have grants to do senior work, you have to go through the Office of Aging. In my county, you do not. You come to our office and I determine whether I can accept the case or not, depending on what the case is about, depending on my caseload. Right now, I'm on emergency cases only because my caseload is a little high, though that should be changing quickly because I've caught up with much of my backlog. And income plays some part of a role in that. Not as much as people think of often, because one of the grants does not have income limits. So I can take some people who would normally not be considered eligible under the legal services guidelines, which are based on the poverty limits. That grant is limited, so I can only take a certain number of cases within that parameter, but I can take cases that are where somebody might be over the asset limits. And a lot of times seniors are, because they've saved for their retirement. So if it's in a retirement fund, that works out. But if there's other income involved or other assets involved, sometimes that would disqualify them from a strictly legal services grant, where I could take them under my other grant.
Right. And we should say, if you live in Onondaga County and you heard some of the things that Maureen was mentioning, the best place to try to qualify for services or go through our application process is going to LASMNY.org. That's Legal Aid Society of Mid New York, so LASMNY.org, or calling our intake line, and that's 877-777-6152. So I'm just curious, have you seen a reduction, or I should say, let's go into power of attorney, or as you called them, advanced directives first. What is a power of attorney again, for people that might not know, and why is it important?
Okay, there's three advanced directives we tend to work on for folks.
Okay.
One is a will. Most people know what a will does. That gives away your property after you die. One is a healthcare proxy, which names somebody who can speak for you if you cannot speak for yourself in a medical situation. So somebody who knows what your wishes are and would be able to convey your wishes to the doctors. The other one, which I regard as more important than a will, is the power of attorney. Because while the power of attorney takes care of, while the will takes care of your property after you die, when you're not around to deal with it, the power of attorney controls what happens during your lifetime. So you're naming somebody who is going to be authorized to act on your behalf while you are living to take care of your business affairs. If you are competent, it does not take away your ability to handle your own business affairs. You can still handle all your affairs, but in the event that something happened where you became incompetent, or if you were just not up to it, you don't have to be incompetent for your power of attorney to take over. And I use my mother as an example. My mother had a number of health problems. Her mind worked just great, but physically she had a great deal of problems, including not being able to speak on the phone very well, because one of her strokes affected her vocal cords. And so people outside of the family had a hard time understanding her. My sister and I were her powers of attorney. We knew what she wanted. And believe me, she talked to us about what she wanted, and we handled her business affairs for her. Had she become incompetent, then we would have been able to do that without directions from her, because she would not be capable of giving directions. So a power of attorney can help you when you're laid up, or can help you if you develop dementia or go into a coma or whatever. They can take care of your business affairs for you. And it's really helpful if you became so sick that you could not direct your own affairs and did not have one of these. Somebody would have to go to court to become your guardian. That's more time consuming and it's more expensive. On the other hand, you got to name somebody that you really, really trust, because these people are authorized on paper to take care of your business. If they go beyond the authority, they can be prosecuted for it, but somebody has to catch that they're going beyond the authority. So it's better to name somebody you know will not take advantage of their ability to get into your bank account or to transfer your property or whatever. So you have to be careful with these things.
You mentioned somebody that you really trust. Are there any kind of things or qualifications that one would look for their power of attorney? Obviously, trust and rapport and relationship. Is there any other advice you would give to somebody that is saying, "Hey, I think I need a power of attorney, but I don't know. What advice could you give me?"
Well, everybody knows their family pretty well.
Yeah.
They know who sticks by the rules and who doesn't.
Okay.
I often suggest that people name two folks as power of attorney.
Okay.
It's another convenience, number one. Go back to my mother. My sister and I were both her power of attorney. When my sister was out of town, she lived closer to my mother. She did most of the stuff most days. But when she was out of town, I was able to step in. So it's convenience as far as that goes. But it also, anybody named in the power of attorney can check on anybody else that's named in the power of attorney.
Okay. So there's some checks and balances there.
There's some checks and balances. There's also a provision in the power of attorney to name somebody as a monitor. That person is not a power of attorney, doesn't have the right to do the business, but does have the right to ask for an accounting. So if that person does not think that the person who's the power of attorney is handling things well, that person has the right to go to that power of attorney and say, give me an accounting of everything you've done within the next 2 weeks. And they have to do that. The court also has the power to ask for an accounting, and so does adult protective. So if somebody doesn't have that monitor, but something seems really fishy, sometimes adult protective will step in and insist on an accounting to see whether or not the person who's named is actually doing what they're supposed to do. You can always revoke a power of attorney as well if you're competent. And I've done plenty of those when people have named somebody that turns out isn't doing a good job.
Okay. That's good information. What would you give, what advice would you give to a senior that doesn't have an estate plan? We talked a little bit about the benefits of future planning, but what if someone says, hey, I don't really have a lot of assets. Why would I create an estate plan? What are the benefits?
They may not need to. They may not need to. If they really don't have anything that they're going to leave when they die, there may not be any need to do a will. I still would advise them to do the papers that would affect them during their lifetime, such as a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. Sometimes when I talk to folks who have modest amount of property, what they want done with their property would be what the state would do anyhow. If you die without a will, there is a formula that the state has that determines who gets the property. And that's normally the spouse and the children, and then descendants of them if the spouse or the children have died. And often it's the same thing, so they don't need to do it. But sometimes people have reasons why they don't want it to go to the folks that the state would normally distribute it to. I've had people whose children who would normally inherit through the state are drug abusers, and they don't want all of their money going to foster the habit. They would rather have the grandchildren who are okay inherit directly than have it go up in smoke, basically. Sometimes somebody has a child from whom they're estranged. Sometimes people have lent one child a considerable amount of money during their lifetime for college educations or higher education of some sort, with the understanding that they're getting their inheritance during the lifetime, and so they're going to be left out of the will. That kind of thing. And of course, then there's second marriages, which get more complicated because people have children from previous marriages, and it gets a little tougher. So there's reasons to do an estate plan, even if you don't have considerable assets in many cases. But sometimes no. I mean, I have folks that live on SSI, have very little property, and they're, you know, what they have, nobody's going to want. They tell me it's going to Salvation Army, you know, and that's basically it. So it's a case-by-case analysis, really.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit and transition into some of the topics relating to the pandemic. The first question is, have you seen a reduction or increase in Medicare coverage for seniors because of the pandemic?
No, that's the one thing that hasn't changed. Medicare coverage has been the same. Medicaid coverage has been the same through the pandemic. In fact, with Medicaid, there's been some automatic extensions. What I have seen is a little bit more of a problem for people who receive home care, because some of the aides don't want to go into the home. Some of the people receiving care don't want aides from the outside coming in because they're afraid that they may be bringing in something that they're worried about. So there's been some complications with home care there, but luckily for most seniors, the Medicare coverage has remained the same, and the Medicaid coverage has remained the same. It's a matter of getting to the care. A lot of people aren't going to their doctors anymore. They're doing remote examinations, and if they're in assisted living or they're in nursing homes, they're having a much bigger problem with COVID, and they're experiencing, I can't get into the nursing homes. Anything I do is by phone or by remote, mostly by phone. Their spouses can't get into the nursing homes. Their families can't get into the nursing homes. They go up to windows. That's been the problem.
Okay. You mentioned you do some stuff around nursing homes. Talk a little bit about what's going on that you're seeing at nursing homes right now.
The majority of what I deal with is getting the nursing homes paid for.
Okay.
So Medicare only covers a nursing home if you're there for rehab in less than 100 days. It can't cover more than 100 days, and it can cover less than 100 days, in which case people then have to apply for Medicaid to get the nursing home paid for. And that is a very complicated analysis. They have to provide tons of documentation. They have to provide their bank statements going back 5 years. They have to explain any transaction into or out of the bank accounts that's more than $2,000, or any regular amount that comes out, even if it's less than $2,000. There's all sorts of issues if they've transferred property to family within the 5 years previous to them going into the nursing home. So it gets very complex. Plus the budgeting itself is complex depending on whether or not they have a spouse living in the community in the family residence, because the spouse is allowed to keep the family residence as long as they're living there, and is allowed to keep a certain amount of assets to support them in the community. So that gets very complex and often gets entangled in what's called a fair hearing, where they get a notice of denial. We appeal that for them, and we go to the hearing on their behalf. So that happens occasionally. There's other issues that come up with nursing homes sometimes. Questions of quality of care, we generally let the Department of Health and the state ombudsman take care of those. We don't do them, but occasionally our situations touch on them. So, but we refer people to the Department of Health and the state ombudsman a lot if there's issues about the quality of the care.
I imagine that can get pretty, well, as you said, it can get pretty complicated, but it's especially difficult for, could be a senior to prove out all those bank statements and everything. It's difficult.
It's a problem for the seniors. It's more of a problem when the senior has dementia and the power of attorney is taking care of it, and the senior didn't leave good records, and the power of attorney is trying to, I remember one situation where we had a nephew who was power of attorney for his aunt who was in her 90s and then had dementia and could not explain anything, and her records were tough, and the nephew was trying to sit down with the dates and figure out what was going on through his aunt's records to try to explain this to social services. So it gets even tougher if somebody does not keep good notes. My recommendation to any senior, whether they're thinking they might go into a nursing home or not, is keep good records of your finances. Because if something happens, if you have that stroke that you didn't expect, if you end up in a nursing home and need to apply for Medicaid, that may be something that you or somebody on your behalf is going to have to do.
Okay. I wanted to back up and talk a little bit about Medicare, Medicaid, the differences, the nuance between those, and then Medicare Part A and B. What are the differences?
Okay. Medicare, if you've been working all your life, is that tax that comes out of your paycheck. It's an insurance program. If you have worked 40 quarters, which is essentially 10 years, if you have worked 40 quarters, you have Part A for free. Okay. If you work less than 40 quarters, between 30 and 40 quarters, you have to pay a nominal amount for Part A. If you work less than 30 quarters, you have to pay a huge amount for Part A, with some exceptions. Part B, Part A is the hospital and nursing home portion of your Medicare.
Okay.
Part B is your regular doctor lab work, the type of stuff that you routinely think of as medical care in the community. Okay. That you're paying into through your Medicare tax, but you also have to pay a premium for it every month once you're receiving Part B. Currently, I think it's $154. It just went up January 1st. That number is close. It might not be exact. That's what most people think of with Medicare. They go to their doctor. If they're on Medicare and their doctor takes Medicare, Medicare is going to pay 80% of their doctor bill, and they have a choice of how to supplement that to get the other 20% paid. They can have other insurance, which is a supplemental plan, and you hear these advertised. Right now you're hearing them advertised constantly because it's just expired the time period, or it's just about to expire the time period to get into a supplemental plan. Or you can go on a Medicare Advantage plan. A Medicare Advantage plan, it is run through Medicare. It's actually known as Medicare Part C, and they would pay a difference, and they sometimes offer extra services that regular Medicare doesn't offer. The main thing that people need to know is if they're going on Medicare or Medicaid, they have to go on at the time that they're first determined their eligibility would start. There's also Medicare Part D, which is the prescription plan. All of those things have premiums, except for Part A if you've worked 40 credits. If you don't go on at the time you're first required to go on, the premiums go up, and they go up pretty high. So if you don't go on Medicare Part B when you're first supposed to go on Medicare Part B, and you wait 2 years, you can end up paying a much higher premium than you would normally. So you got to pay attention to that. I am over 65. I am not getting Medicare Part B right now because I am still working, and that's one of the exceptions. But if I had stopped working when I turned 65, I would have had to start paying into Medicare Part B right away. So, you know, if you're working and your employer has more than 20 employees, there's an exception for that. Okay. But because I get my insurance through my employer still. But it's a very technical thing. And when people start getting those notices about Medicare, they're best not to ignore them.
Okay. Sage advice. I want to talk a little bit about seniors and scammers and what you have seen as far as scams and why you think the unfortunate cases of seniors are unfortunately a group that you hear about on the news are scammed more often than other groups and unfortunately targeted. So what are you seeing as far as scams, and what advice could you give to folks to avoid scams and get out of scams?
Okay. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. If somebody calls saying they're your grandchild, don't believe it unless you absolutely know that your grandchild. That's the one that I find the most insidious, the grandchild one. They call up a senior generally fairly late at night when somebody might be tired. Oh, grandma, this is, you know, your grandson. And it's, oh, Joey. Yes, it's Joey. They just got a piece of information from you. Oh, your grandson's name. So now they're going to use that against you. And you start a conversation. You're providing them with information that they're then trying to use to get you to send money. If anybody asks you to send money through Wells Fargo, through gift cards, to an address you don't know, by a certified mail, if they're at a police station being arrested, you can confirm that through the police. And they usually give you the sob story. Oh, I just got arrested and I don't want mom and dad to know. Can you please get me out of this situation? That one's a real tough one because people are usually caught off guard and they're being told it's urgent and they have to do this stuff right away. Other ones tend to run the gamut, to tell you the truth. There's so many scams out there. Never give any business who calls your social security number, your account number. If you get a call saying, this is your credit card company, and you ask back, which I do every time I get one of these calls because I'm a senior and I get these calls, and I say, oh, which one? And they can't identify the company that they're calling from because they just call. We're calling about your credit card. What's your number? Let's confirm it. No, if they're your credit card company, they know what your number is. If their Social Security, they know what your Social Security number is. Do not give any of that, birth dates, Social Security numbers, card numbers. If you think it might be legitimate, hang up, look at the business phone number in the phone book or online if you use the online phone book. Look up and call the actual business and say, I just got a call. Was this legit? Don't call back the number they've given you because they're just going to direct you back to another scammer. Call the business and report it to the Attorney General and report it to the Federal Trade Commission if you've gotten a weird call. And if you've actually gotten scammed, go to your local police.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reports. They often can't do anything. Often it's somebody offshore, but report it. Report it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's terrible. I actually had an experience similar to what you're saying with somebody that was talking to me about a scam, and they researched their grandkids online. They were able to find their grandkids, and there was a picture maybe of them at graduation or something, and they were able to identify the name and everything and act as though they were this person. So be careful out there. Yeah, absolutely.
Keep your Facebook, if you're sharing pictures of your grandkids and all that other stuff, keep it private. Do not have your family stuff on a public setting because that's where they get this stuff.
That's good advice. Is there any advice that you would have? I know a lot of people now that are getting the COVID vaccine. Is there any advice you would give to seniors looking to get vaccinated?
Keep on trying.
Keep on trying?
Yeah, I'm getting my second shot on Thursday. I lucked out with a friend who was arranging for a number of people, and she was refreshing regularly and got me an appointment. But you just have to keep on trying. Get it, the best you can. It's now in New York State, it's now open for seniors who are under 65 as well, if you have a medical condition. And each county is handling that different. In Onondaga County, if you go to one of the state sites, you have to have something showing that you have that condition. If you go to one of the county sites, you have to have a letter from your doctor. So, each county is doing that differently as far as documenting that you have a pre-existing condition that would make you more susceptible. But you just have to keep on trying. There's not enough supply out there right now.
Okay. Last question is, we keep hearing about another round of stimulus. So we'll see if that happens. We're hoping should be hitting people soon. How does this affect public benefits that seniors might be receiving?
It shouldn't have much of an effect at all.
Okay.
As far as any other stimulus has gone, it's exempt as an asset or a income. And that includes folks in nursing homes. The nursing homes can't touch that money either. And that, I think, has been fairly clear in this round of stimulus, and the stimulus that happened back with the financial crisis that wasn't so clear, and some of the nursing homes had wanted to grab onto that money as extra money to pay to the nursing home, but it should be not counted. It does not count toward Medicaid. It does not count toward any calculations that are done as far as eligibility for the nursing homes go.
Awesome. Thank you, Maureen. We appreciate you coming on and talking about some of these important topics for seniors. And if you are a senior in Onondaga County, you can try to qualify for our benefits for elder law. If you call 877-777-6152, and an intake paralegal will speak to you about your civil legal question or situation. Or you can go to our website, lasmny.org, Legal Aid Society of Mid-New York. That's LASMNY.org. And on the upper right, there's a button that says Apply for Services. Yeah, thank you so much, Maureen Kiefer, Staff Attorney at Legal Aid Society. It's awesome to talk to you. And thanks for joining us.
Okay.